I don't know if the raccoon thing is raising my profile or not.
You were on Colbert, of course.
That's true.
It was. You were all over nighttime television.
I mean, Eric Ramsey is inarguably manager of the year at this point.
Caitlin, did you have field tilt on your bingo card today when you came in this morning?
Hey, by the numbers, you gotta be ready. That's actually like one of the easier ones for me to understand.
What's up, everybody? This is MLS, and we are feeling fresh as a bunch of daisies over here with Taylor Twellman, Sasha Question, and Mo Adu after our first double match week of the season. We gave our friend Bradley Wright Phillips the night off for, Lucho Acosta only passing his MLS goal contributions of 151.
He's crying.
Yeah, he was supposed to be on. No, he was supposed to be on, but he texted me saying, I got to come on because he gave all his praise to Lucho during the weekend. So he was like, nah, I'm not coming on here singing his praises no more. I'm good.
That does not sound like the Bradley Wright Phillips I know. Speaking of Lucho Acosta, the marquee matchup this weekend in the Eastern Conference is FC Cincinnati heading to take on Toronto FC. An important note on Toronto is 22 points. All of last season, what they are on right now, 22 points. What a turnaround it has been for John Herdman, for the franchise, but also Federico Bernardeschi, fresh off of a hat trick. It's incredible what they have done. 5-1 over their rival Montreal. Sasha, how much can TFC, though, hang with the likes of like a Miami and FC Cincinnati?
It's been an unbelievable turnaround, but I'm not sure that they can compete for the Eastern Conference title with Miami and Cincinnati and Columbus. Listen, Columbus sits below them in the table right now, but I expect them by the end of the year to climb past them. I do think they can compete with the two New York teams for the number 4 seed in the East. If Federico Bernardeschi is playing at his best level like he was this past weekend, and John Herdman gets the rest of the group to rally around him and Insigne the way he has this season, they can compete for that 4th spot. But this weekend will be a really big test against a very good FC Cincinnati team that's on a roll, and you're going to be without Bernardeschi this weekend due to suspension.
Tosh, I don't disagree with you. I like the way that John Herdman has come in and added some elements that aren't necessarily even recognized on the pitch, like personality. There's a different kind of grittiness and scrappiness to this side. You can take that NYCFC game, all the melee that happened after the game. Although you look at that with a negative light, I kind of view it as a positive because moments like that can sometimes galvanize a group. But I agree with you. And the one thing that I look at the TFC team when you're comparing it to the rest of the East, I'm not sure they have the same depth. If Bernardeschi gets injured, if Insigne gets injured again, the drop-off from them to the next player stepping in is pretty significant. But right now, they're in a good bit of form. If they can continue this, and as you mentioned, this weekend's a big, big matchup for them. But I also see them dropping to maybe 6th or 7th in the East. Still a playoff spot, but not in the top 4.
I think success this year, outkicking their coverage, for lack of a better phrase, is getting a home playoff game. I think if we're really trying to talk about Toronto in the supporter shield race, we're obviously not paying attention to the roster and the limitations they have for bringing a ton of players coming in this summer. So for John Herdman, make of it what you want from the New York City. That's an offline conversation of what happened, what didn't happen, what may have been. The fact is they're playing much better than they were last year. They're bought in, but I doubt they're in the supporter shield conversation. I think a home playoff game, 4th seed at best, is a real success for Toronto.
As for FC Cincinnati, they are just 1 point behind Supporter Shield leading Miami, and it has been quite the showing for 19-year-old striker Kevin Kelsey, contributing right away. Mo, he's got 2 goals inside 147 minutes of play. How much can the 19-year-old Venezuelan be that guy for FC Cincinnati?
Oh, Kevin Kelsey can definitely be that guy, and FC Cincinnati need him to be that guy. Lucho Acosta has been carrying the torch for this team over the last few seasons. And this season, especially in the attack, without that lack of a true number 9, a number 9 who likes to play between the width of the goalpost, a number 9 who's good in the box. The 2 goals that he's scored so far this season, Kevin Kelsey, they've shown his movement. He has instinctual attributes that come to life when he's in and around the 18. How quickly him and Lucho Acosta have built a relationship has been important. But I think ultimately what he brings to this team is he frees up Acosta. He gives Acosta more license. He gives him more space to operate in, and ultimately that gives the wingbacks option in the box as well.
I mean, Mo and Sasha, I said it this week. I actually think they could go back-to-back and win Supporter Shield. I really do. I think Kelsey's got to get fit. He's not there yet. His mobility's a little limited, and Pat Noonan and his staff are going to try to get him to that spot. But look at what Kubo's done. Kubo's played, 5-6 positions, all of them at a high level. So he's filled in the gaps very well. I don't think they're as dynamic as they were last year, but I think they're more effective than they were last year, in large part because defensively, they went out and shored that up, signing Miles Robinson. He's the best free agent on the market. Matt Miazga is very, very motivated for how last season ended with him not being available for the Eastern Conference Final. If Kelsey gives them 10 to 12 goals for the remaining part of the year, but just stays fit and is active, I don't see any reason why they don't win the Supporters' Shield race and go back-to-back. I really believe the way this team is playing now, and in large part, guys, they've only given up 10 goals. It says 11. Matt Miazga scored an own goal I've never seen before in my life. They've really only given up 10 goals this year. They can win games 1-0 better than any team in the league. Now you throw Kelsey to the equation. I don't see why they can't win back-to-back Supporters' Shield.
Well, we also talked about how are they going to replace Alvaro Barreal, who was, a best 11 type player in that left wing back position. And it's taken Orish a few weeks to come in and start to understand how to play with Lucho Acosta. But the way that those two are connecting on the field now spells really good things for FC Cincinnati. And I'm with you, Taylor. I think they can win it again.
Back-to-back Supporters' Shield.
By the way.
Yes, Mo?
Oh, I was just going to say, by the way, guys, we're talking about a FC Cincinnati team where Bupenza hasn't even played in the last few weeks as well, right? So if he comes in and he now feels the pressure, Taylor, you know what it's like. You're a striker. If another striker comes in and he's having a good bit of form while you're out, that puts the pressure on you to come in and hit the ground running again as well.
I'll be shocked if he plays Cincinnati the rest of the year.
Oh, wow.
Bupenza, of course, out with injury. We've also got the longest road trip in Major League Soccer this weekend. Inter Miami making the long trip to Vancouver. We know that Miami has Vancouver beat when it comes to offense with guys like Suarez, like Messi. 36 goals on the season compared to Vancouver's 18. So, Mo, where can Vancouver beat this Miami side?
Ooh, well, if Vancouver's going to have success, first of all, it starts with the fact that they're playing at home. You mentioned the long trek that Miami has to make, but Vancouver's front three, Ryan Gauld, Brian White, Fafa Pico, have to get back to that early season form that we saw them in, where they were efficient, they were creating chances consistently. Miami's a team, all the goals that they score, great. We know in a variety of different ways, but they still do give up opportunities when their fullbacks are higher up the pitch and there's space to exploit. So if Vancouver can play through the lines quickly, if Fafa Pico, if Brian White and Ryan Gauld come back to life in terms of their efficiency in the final third, Vancouver have a chance in this match.
You know how they can win, Mo? At 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30 in the morning, just call the hotel, throw a huge party outside the hotel. And obviously they're playing the game on turf. We all know, we've all been there. Vancouver's not the best turf. They've got a shot. But I would do everything off the field that I could to get them a little rattle.
With Miami, I really want to talk about Leo Campana, not Messi, not Suarez. For me, it was, I think for anybody watching that entire game, it was what he did in 17 seconds. 0-0. He puts the team up for the game winner, 1-0, to beat DC United this past weekend. And as if that wasn't impressive enough, it was this soundbite that really stood out to me. Take a listen.
See you working every single day and how much work you put into making these moments happen. What does this does for your confidence?
Yeah, I think I always say to my family that good things are coming because I believe in myself. I believe in the way I work. So that's it. It's never stop believing. Just work hard. Shut up when you have to. Sorry, but this is the way life is. So I would like to thank my teammates and all the people that are with me every day.
24-year-old Campana, of course, now backing up Suarez, and this is a guy that on most MLS teams would be a starting striker. And Taylor, I love what he says there of that. He says sometimes you just have to eat poop, basically, and accept it. What are you seeing from him? How can he stay relevant in backing up Suarez?
Well, he's staying relevant. I'll make this abundantly clear. There are about 6 or 7 MLS teams that are watching Campana very closely because this summer, if the new rules that are rumored to be coming into Major League Soccer come into fruition, then there may be an opportunity where they don't need to keep Campana in order to have the young under-22 players on the roster. Miami may want to go somewhere else with the designated player. I'm telling you right now, there are at least 6 teams that will trade for him immediately and make calls. So whether it's for 7 minutes, 77 minutes, or 70 minutes, it doesn't matter. Every single time he plays, He knows he's going to be a hot commodity, whether he's in pink or he's not. Fantastic goal he scored on the weekend. He gives them more mobility than Suarez. Suarez can score goals on one leg. He's already proven that. But the point being, in this league, he's only started, 40-some-odd games. He's got 23 goals, guys. So he's a known commodity when playing regularly, playing at a high level. He can score goals in his league. He knows that. He's not an idiot. He's still very young in his career. And I don't know, he may not be there this summer, depending on what Inter Miami chooses, how Copa America goes, who's got to go away for the Olympics. So Campana's in the driver's seat of making the most of every single opportunity, and there's not a better way of doing than the goal he scored against DC United.
In 17 seconds, nonetheless. A big matchup in the Western Conference is the Colorado Rapids taking on Minnesota United. Minnesota United quietly moving into second place, Colorado in sixth. And just to show you how jam-packed the Western Conference is, 3 points separating these two sides. And a big part of the Rapids' success this season has been from the academy product, Cole Bassett, attacking midfielder, just 22 years old. 24 goals, 13 assists in his 111 MLS matches played, and he has been capped for the U.S. men's national team. Sasha, midfielder to midfielder. He has started every single game for the Rapids this season. What about an MLS best 11?
I think it's in his cards. The fact that we're having the conversation about Cole Bassett being in the conversation for MLS Best 11 shows exactly what type of season he's having. When I look around the league and think about other box-to-box midfielders that are having the impact on their team, maybe Timmy Tillman from LAFC has a shout, but Cole Bassett has been fantastic. Bradley Wright Phillips likes to call him Major League Soccer's Frank Lampard because of the way he shows up in the box and the type of goals that he scored. And I don't think the comparison is so far off. When you just see that he shows up late, he makes good runs out of midfield, he's got a good shot on target. This goal he scored last week in Salt Lake, a little bit of inventiveness. He's shown real quality this season. He's tall, he's skinny, he's got good range of passing, he can run all day.
Oh, here we go.
He is somebody, no wonder I like him.
Here we go. There's some comparisons, some similarities to you, but Bassett, because I like the fact that Chris Armas dropped him back to playing as a number 8. In the first few games of the season, he was flirting with him as a number 10 to try to find a way to really get the best out of Mihailovic. But with the injury to Connor Ronan, that gave the opportunity for him to come back a line, which I think is his best. I think his timing is really good. His movement off the ball, he has a good sense of when to arrive into the box. That's where he scored a lot of his goals. And he's also, you mentioned he's fit. You're not lying. Season have come in the last 20 minutes of games. So he still has that appetite, the desire to finish off games and make big plays. Scored a game winner in the Rocky Mountain Cup, scored the equalizer away at Inter Miami. Big things still ahead for this young player, but he's the season so far.
As for Minnesota United, they are just 4 points behind first place in the West, Real Salt Lake. They are just creeping in there. But the important note is they have 2 more games in hand on Real Salt Lake and Cincinnati. They've played 3 less games than Inter Miami. So in those 3 hypothetical games, should they have won 2 and drawn 1, they would be equal on points with Inter Miami. Taylor, I know you don't think we should be talking about Toronto in the Supporter Shield conversation, but how much should we be talking about Minnesota?
The fact that we're even having this conversation is remarkable. If you would have told anyone at Minnesota that Reynoso and Pukki and Pongi would be operating at status quo and you'd be just off the pace for Supporter Shield, they would have signed the dotted line immediately. Honestly, if they win the Supporter Shield, this is a Leicester City type of accomplishment in Major League Soccer than we've ever seen one, because they do not have a superstar. Now, Robin Lood's playing extremely well, but honestly, you guys tell me if I'm wrong. The roster's arguably worse than it was last year with no Reynoso. Pukki's got 2 goals on the year, both of those in early March, hasn't scored since then, and you're still playing at this clip? I mean, Eric Ramsey is inarguably manager of the year at this point, and he wasn't even there for the first month. So it says a lot to me about the group, but more so about the, I would say, energy that's in that building from top to bottom. He made 4 subs on the fly on Saturday. That's never been that way. So if the roster is as weak, if not status quo as it was years ago, and yet here we are talking about the Supporter Shield. They won't win the Supporter Shield. They won't, because I don't see the ownership group going out and spending a ton of money. I fully expect them to go the 4 U22 players and 2 DPs once they get the dust settled and they get all their ducks in a row. But guys, the fact that we're talking about Minnesota United on May 22nd being on pace for the Supporter Shield, no way anyone would have had this. So good on them.
That's been a remarkable season for Minnesota, for sure. We have to admit that. I'm with Taylor. I don't think they have the cards to win the Supporter Shield because I don't see a consistent goal scorer. Pukki hasn't been that guy. And if you think Oluwaseyi is going to be the guy that gets you 15 to 18 goals, I just don't think that's happening. He's still a young player. He's still getting better. He's adding stuff to his game week in and week out and making the team better. But without a consistent goal scorer that you can rely on in a 0-0 game to make the difference, if you don't have that, you're not winning the Supporter Shield.
Mo, is it just the goal scorer that would make you talk about them in the Supporter Shield conversation?
That's the biggest part, but there's still that intrigue. I'm still intrigued with what is going to happen surrounding the whole Reynoso situation, and if that means that they're able to offload him in the summer and they can replace him.
He's gone, Mo. He's gone. 100%.
So there you go. So
his bags are packed.
So if he's gone, Taylor, to your point, this now puts a little bit of pressure and responsibility, right, on ownership to say, how can we go out there and bring in a player to match that kind of caliber? Because this team is overperforming by, I would imagine, everyone's standards to this point, minus everyone inside that building there in Minnesota. But if they can go out in the summertime and bring in a player who can take this team to the next level, whether that's a proven goal scorer or another creative player to play that number 10 in place of Reynoso, you start to dream a little bit more for this group of players.
I agree, Mo. There's a responsibility there. But you already got Pukki on the roster, and you've got him till June 31st of 2025. So if you're really going to double down and go out and get another number 9, that isn't going to work. They've got to make sure they've got the next Reynoso that's going to be there for 3 or 4 years. And I don't know, because of the interchange of the sporting director with the new coach coming in late, I don't know if they want to rush into that. But they're out kicking their coverage, and good on them, because players 1 through 24 believe in what they're doing, and that says a lot for what Minnesota United's doing up to this point.
Another team that has crept up the Western Conference standings is Austin FC, who will be taking on San Jose this weekend. Before we get to the big question, though, let's go back and watch some old tape.
Only the Houston Dynamo have fewer expected goals than Austin FC, and they have outperformed that by almost 6 goals. So at some point, the numbers don't lie, people do. So this could be a little facade. They may come back to the mean a little bit, but Josh Wolf, Austin FC, they're not going to care. I'm just not totally sold on 4 of the last 5 being the Austin FC of 2024.
For Austin FC, for Josh Wolf's side, Taylor, it was a 6-point week. How much do you feel like they're still overperforming?
Well, they're still in the bottom 5 of the league in expected goals. And when you look at their 6 wins on the year, 2 of those against Houston, and that's the only playoff team ahead of them, and the LA Galaxy are winless in 5. I'm not taking anything away from Austin FC, because the question is, do I believe in them? Yeah. Do I believe that they're better than they were last year, where they finished in the bottom 3 or 4 of the league? Sure, absolutely. But if you're asking me that they're a guarantee to get a home playoff game, no. But there are signs that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Buying out Rigoni is massive. He was a huge disappointment. He was a bust as a designated winger. Now they've got a guy on the docket from Ghana that's coming from Red Star Belgrade, who scored goals in the Champions League. He's got the ability to put the ball in the back of the net in the playoff Driussi. But my point still remains the same. 6 wins, 2 against the same team in Houston. They're an 8th of the West, and the other ones, the LA Galaxy, are winless in 5. I got to see a little bit more out kicking your coverage, beating teams that you're competing with for the playoffs, and not teams that are outside. I'm not saying you got to play who's in front of you, but come to me when they've played a real gauntlet of LAFC, Seattle, and teams that they're fighting for the playoffs with, then we can have that conversation. But if they go out and change this roster, good on them, because I think Driussi needs help.
All right, fair enough. The San Jose Earthquakes and Austin FC kick off 10:30 p.m. Eastern time, one of 4 late-night matches out west this weekend on MLS Season Pass. Joining Mo Adu right now and I are my friends Kaylin Carr and Matt Doyle. And before we get into Atlanta taking on LAFC, Kaylin, what a past 10 days it has been for you. You had Messi in Montreal, and you had the raccoon on the field in Philadelphia. What do you think did more to raise your profile as a commentator in North America? Was it Messi or was it the raccoon?
I don't know if the raccoon thing is raising my profile or not.
You were on Colbert, of course.
That's true.
It was. You were all over nighttime television.
I mean, I felt trapped in that moment. It felt about an hour for me, and then I think by the end I just threw my hands up and said, okay, we're just going to embrace the chaos here. So, yeah, you never know what to expect. I thought maybe the viral clip that was going to go all over the world would have been Inter Miami and Messi against Montreal, his first time in Canadian soil. Of course, it was still a great match, but the idea that, yeah, anything can happen in MLS, I think this past week proved that.
But a raccoon in Chester, Pennsylvania, man, that just viral. All right, let's talk about the 2018 MLS Cup winners taking on the 22 MLS Cup winners in LAFC, and it is not happy days in Atlanta. There's rumors of Giacomakis potentially making a move to Liga MX. After such a good start to the season, too, for Atlanta, Almada now hurt. They have not won a game in 8. Kaylin, how hot is Gonzalo Pineda's seat?
It's a tough question. I think they're going to give him some time to figure this out, partly because some of the things you mentioned, the things that are up in the air right now that I think can get fixed. You make a decision, and I think that's the biggest part for me is what's hanging over their heads. Is Giacomakis going to leave? Is he going to stay? Thiago Almada, of course, is always rumored. Can they keep him for the long term, or at least make a decision to settle on that? And the real issue, I think, for Pineda is the road form has been poor, but it's always been poor for Atlanta United. They haven't been able to take any of that energy on the road and get results, but the home form is really where they've let themselves down this season. 3 home wins, but also 3 home losses. So the idea that they have this match against LAFC, a tough week ahead, going to Inter Miami after that, they have to get on solid footing, and I'd expect them to give them some time to figure that out.
How much time, Mo?
That's the million-dollar question, because I agree with a lot of what Kaylin said there. But the reality is, in this business, in this sport, coaches, you almost get hired to get fired, right? There's a time limit to everything. And for a club that has the ambitions, that has the expectations from ownership, from the players, from their fans, like Atlanta United does, at some point, and I feel for Gonzalo Pineda because in some ways it's been a tough course for him. Players being injured, the confusion, as you mentioned, Kaylin, about the futures of Thiago Almada and Giacomakis as of late. But nonetheless, that roster and the results that they've had, they just don't add up. They just don't match up. And so I hope that they can get a result against LAFC. I hope that they can get a result against Inter Miami, because if not, 10 games without a win, that seat starts to get, it goes from being lukewarm to boiling to it's in fuego.
105 games across all competitions for Gonzalo Pineda. So I would argue he's gotten some time, Kaylin. He has 0 trophies, 1.33 points per match across all competitions. Prorate that over the course of an MLS season. You're talking around 44 points. 45 points for a team that is annually one of the biggest spenders in MLS. They went out and they got Thiago Almada. When they said, Thiago Almada, he needs to have a running mate, they went out and they got Georgios Giacomakis. They need to go get wingers. They go get Sabit Labjanidze, Jean De Silva. They added new center backs. They added a new goalkeeper. They've added new fullbacks. They have given him resources and they have given him time. And his seat has to be burning up right now. It is must-win time for Gonzalo Pineda.
As for LAFC, must be nice to be LAFC. Off a bye this past weekend, and prior to that, outscoring their opponents 5-0. Stylistically, Doyle, showing us what this team can do with the ball. How does that set up for the summer arrivals that include Olivier Giroud?
We don't know yet. We don't know what version of Olivier Giroud
But how exciting is it then?
I'm not excited about that yet. I'm excited about seeing what they're doing with this new style of play, because Steve Cherundolo took a lot of criticism down the stretch last year and into the playoffs for being kind of a one-trick pony with this team. Well, over the past 7 games, they have won the possession battle 5 times. They have gone over 80% pass completion 6 times. They've won the expected goals battle 7 of those 7 games. In the previous 6 games, they had been routinely around 40% possession, under 80% pass completion. And the most important thing to me is they're getting more of the ball to Ilie Sanchez. He's getting about 40 to 60% more touches in this 7-game run. The stylistic difference for LAFC comes down to putting the ball on his foot, because he is the best tempo setter on the team. He is the guy who makes this team go. He's the guy who gets guys like Timothy Tillman and Mateus Bogusz and, of course, Dennis Bouanga on the ball in better positions. And what it's allowed them to do is open up this attack and get more involvement from Christian Oliveira. And now with Oliveira balancing Bouanga on the other side, they look like the best attack in MLS outside of the guys in South Florida.
To start the season, we were saying, do the LA Galaxy have the best attack in MLS? And it's been a little bit of a change, Mo. Winless in their last 5. Now 4 of those have been draws. How much of a concern do you have for Greg Vanney's side?
My concern for Greg Vanney and the LA Galaxy lies on the future of Joseph Paintsil, how long he's going to be out, because coming into this season, I was going to say but not just I think everyone who watched this man play pinpointing him as being the ultimate difference maker for the LA Galaxy, the ultimate player in terms of changing how they're able to build out of the back and how they're able to attack teams. Similar to how Doyle was talking about LAFC being multifaceted, well, Paintsil provided that for LA Galaxy because he gives them that threat in behind, that player who can stretch the pitch, that pace to take players on 1v1. So in lieu of him being in the lineup, you bring in the likes of Diego Fagundes, who has experience in this league, who's shown that he's more than capable of playing that position, but he plays it different. So now the responsibility to be that deep-lying threat maybe shifts to Peck. Maybe you're going to get more out of him. So my concern is just the timeline on how long he's out, because at full strength, I still look at this Galaxy side as being one that can create chances. Now it's just about, can they become more efficient, more similar to what we saw at the beginning of the season.
Important to note, a few days ago, Vanney saying that the hamstring injury for Paintsil has him out a few weeks. Kaylin.
Well, I think that's important, and you hit the nail on the head, Mo, because what he does is he adds some space in behind, right? And when you mentioned Fagundes, he plays on the left, but he's always going to tuck in. They move Peck to the right. He's also going to tuck in on his left, and what that does is condense the field, which is the exact opposite of what Paintsil did when we saw the Galaxy last season not be successful. It was easy. You just make the midfield tight. You starve space for Ricky Puig. That's what's happened over these last few weeks. The one positive for the Galaxy in this 4-match unbeaten streak or 5-match without a win, however you want to frame it, the last 2, they get Jalen Neal back. They've kept clean sheets in both of them. So if they can get him back in that back line and then add Paintsil back, that's a recipe that Greg Vanney will have to be happy about.
The LA Galaxy will be hosting the Houston Dynamo, whose offensive struggles continue, and there is an exclamation point on it at this point in the season. 1 win in 6, and most concerning is just 3 goals over those 6 games. None of them, Kaylin, coming from strikers. How much is the Dynamo ceiling kept if they do not make a summer move for a striker?
Well, there may be no more obvious need across an MLS roster right now than to say that a number 9 for Houston is gaping wide open. And look, even last season, it wasn't like they had the high-priced money makers going and scoring goals. It was Corey Baird. They did it by committee. But this year, it's been completely different. They haven't been able to get enough of it. I mean, I think of a guy this team could be number 1 in the Western Conference if they had a striker.
What could they do with a Leo Campana?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Or if they went out and spent big, like a Chicho Arango. Real Salt Lake is top, right? So this is a team that I think has similar quality, similar profile. They dominate the ball, but then it just kind of falls apart in that final stretch.
More concerning to me is that the way they dominated the ball last year led to repeatable patterns of play in the attacking third. We would see Dynamo goals where Baird is drifting to the back post off of combination play and Griffin Dorsey getting forward on the overlap. We saw that week after week after week. That pattern of play has disappeared. And I don't think it's just personnel. I think something has gone wrong with how they're using the ball as a collective through midfield, and I think they have to solve that before the summer transfer window, because we have 2 more months before the summer transfer window. They have to do work fixing things now. They can't wait for a striker to come in, because by then the season will have gotten away from them.
What's the best way to fix it?
I mean, it has to be going through film, and it has to be, making it translate in practice. Here's what worked last year. Here's our patterns of play through midfield. I think getting Adalberto or Coco Carrasquilla on the ball more, coming in from that right wing spot, that opens up a lane for Dorsey to get forward. So it's all there. It's all there in the film. We all saw it happen last year. They need to get back to that somehow.
Two teams that are looking to get back to winning ways are the Portland Timbers and Sporting Kansas City. Timbers, 1 win in 11. SKC, 2 all season. Both clubs below the playoff line. Doyle, SKC, Portland, who needs the win more?
By definition, it's Portland, because the home team the onus is on the home team to protect home field advantage, and it's especially so with the Timbers, because 3 of their next 4 are on the road at teams that will be fighting with them for a playoff spot in the Western Conference. So it is absolutely more pressure on the Portland Timbers. They need the win more than Sporting Kansas City does. That said, time is running out for Sporting Kansas City. They desperately need a result here themselves.
Yeah, Doyle, that's what I was going to say. I agree with you that the home team, the onus is always on the home team to perform and try to use that home field advantage to change their course of how the season's progressing. But you can't. This one for me is almost like a coin toss. You can't take away from how disappointing. I was going to say how poor Sporting Kansas City have been, but how disappointing, because the season that they had last year, where they had the slow start, but then they found a way to galvanize the group and rebound and pull through, make the playoffs, et cetera, win the first round against St. Louis. And so you come into this season thinking, okay, there's no way we're going to repeat that kind of form. There's no way we're going to have this kind of a downslope yet again in any kind of moment. Now, I know they've missed Johnny Russell, their captain, had missed time, and he had been out for some games. And you can make excuses, and you can use these excuses because they do play a role in results and determining games. But ultimately, Sporting Kansas City, there have been certain trends that have played out through the course of this season, whether it's conceding late goals, whether it's conceding goals at home in games. And I just look at this team and I think at some point, that pressure, we were just talking about Gonzalo Pineda and other coaches and all that kind of stuff. At some point, for a club that has a manager, that has a personnel like Peter Vermees in place, the expectation from their fans, from their players, it has to be higher. And the players, they know that.
Two teams that are trending in very much the different direction from one another is New York City FC. Who would have thunk a few weeks ago after the conversations we were having, and the New England Revolution. A big derby win, Kaylin, this past weekend for NYCFC over the New York Red Bulls. Not only did they get that, but they leapfrogged their rivals to take 3rd place in the East. How poised, though, is City to be able to keep this form alive?
Yeah, you mentioned my crazy week. New York City had quite a week themselves, first going away to Toronto, where they had yet to win an away game all season, and then they get the 3 points. Of course, there was the craziness and the suspensions that came out of that. But I think you got to give Nick Cushing his flowers at this point. This was a guy that, as Mo mentioned, the results weren't there. The seat seemed like it was heating up, and he's gotten the results in this home stretch, but then continued on with 2 wins away and then coming back in a derby against your rival, the Hudson River Derby. So I think the performance as well, and then as well, Bakrar getting the best out of him, maybe moving him to the bench. Then he gets that final goal to be the decisive one. And then the last piece is Santi Rodriguez for me, who has taken a big step forward as a leader. He's on pace to get double-digit goals, double-digit assists, which he's never even come close to at this point. So everything right now in New York City has been fantastic for them, and I think Nick Cushing deserves a lot of credit.
Can't say the same in Foxborough. New England continuing to be at the very bottom of the table in MLS, and it feels like the wheels are all but off, Mo. You're hearing stories about players unhappy, perhaps the front office unhappy, but Caleb Porter saying, I'm bought in, the players are bought in. If you're a player right now on the Revs, what do you do?
Oh, man. I was going to say that I've been in a similar situation my first year in Toronto, but the chaos that surrounded our team wasn't so much that there were so many pieces that just seemed to be out of whack, from whether it's confusion from the front office standpoint or the players. It was just more so we weren't getting results. And so what we did in that scenario was we leaned into each other. And that has to be the case for this group now, because when these players walk into the locker room, when they walk onto the training pitch, when they walk onto the game pitch and off that pitch, all they can look at is themselves, right? And so you have to try to galvanize yourself as a collection of players and say, if we're not happy with the way, maybe let's say the front office is operating, we're not happy with the way the coaching is going, whatever your adversity is, you as players have to stand united and figure out a way to get out of the situation collectively, because yes, coaches will get criticized. Yes, there will be pressure put on the front office to make changes and do this and that. But ultimately, the spotlight is always on the players. The spotlight is always going to be on the players and how they perform on the pitch. And so for New England, first and foremost, they got to get back to protecting their home field. To have one win on at home and one win on the road, that to me is just nowhere near good enough, even regardless of what else is happening away from the pitch.
Everything about this is
one
concerning,
of the concerns,
but one of the major concerns is not just that the players who you would expect to be good, like Carlos Gil or Tomas Chancalay, the DPs, the foundational pieces of this team are underperforming. But the Revs, after having sort of a golden age of pushing young players into the lineup and getting massive contributions from them homegrown players, they've seen that trick. It's the faucet has turned off this year. Noel Buck has fewer than 200 minutes across all competitions. Esmir Bajraktarevic, he was a starter to start the year. He is no longer getting big minutes for this team. A few other guys who I think they expected to break through, they haven't been able to get on the field as well. And because of that, it feels like the roster has gotten compressed. And when the roster gets compressed, then every little injury, every suspension has an outsized effect on the team's ability to compete week after week. So it's all gone wrong. And it's not just in the box score, and it's not just in the personnel. You look at the underlying numbers, Toronto FC was terrible last year. They were at minus 0.67 expected goals per 90. New England this year, minus 0.95. That is a team that's getting played off the field each and every week. The players got to look at themselves, the coach, the front office. It's all gone so catastrophically wrong since August of last year. You have to wonder if a massive teardown is going to come over the next couple of transfer windows.
Before we wrap, you mentioned DPs, you mentioned young players. Mo, is it on the DPs to be that person you mentioned?
Yeah, for sure it is. In these kind of scenarios, the DPs, whether it's because of the price tag, whether it's the pedigree or the caliber of player, generally they come in, not even generally, we always talk about DPs have to hit, and they have to hit in multiple ways. That's performance-wise. You expect them to assume some kind of leadership and responsibility, but also those are the players that most people on the team are going to look to in these kind of moments. How is this player responding? How is he reacting? How is his performance taking a hit? What is he saying in these moments? Is he finding ways to challenge players, to bring the best out of players through, whether that's through his actions on the pitch or how he's communicating with the players? So for sure, that's always who the focal point turns to. The other part would be players who have experience at the club, players who have been there for a while. And this could be a tricky conversation because at times those players might not be featuring anymore. Mm-hmm. They might be out of the lineup. So there could be that bitterness attached to that. So it takes a big personality to still step up in these kind of moments and still put the team beyond themselves and find a way to try to draw this team out of the mud.
The Revs going for win number 3 on the season, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on MLS Season Pass. It is that time of the show, buying or selling. Matt Doyle, the armchair analyst, gives us the numbers, and Kalen Carr tells us when and when he's not opening up his wallet today. Let's start off with FC Dallas taking on top of the West Real Salt Lake.
Yeah, our number is 28th. That's where Dallas are in touches per game so far this season, down from 9th last year. We've talked a lot about the big tactical and strategic shift that Nico Estevez is trying to implement, and really there it all is in one number. They used to be a team that used the ball, and now they're kind of allergic to it, and honestly, it's taken a bigger toll on them defensively than it has on their attack, though it really hasn't been good for either side of the ball this year.
Yeah, I'll buy that. And it's ironic because it seems like last year they had so many touches but maybe weren't able to do enough of it, but the defense hold it down. Then the defense breaks. The touches, aren't there, but I guess the one point of hope is maybe Petar Musa being able to get his 5th of the season. If they can get him going, He's had limited service. I think he's a player that really relies on service to be able to make an opportunity. So even though, yes, the touches haven't been there, if they can get him chances, at least there's some hope.
I think the hope is in the combination of Petar Musa and Jesus Ferreira up top. It's like almost just like play a 3-5-2, put those two guys up top, let them combine and make magic, the two of them together, and then hope that the defense can hold behind them, because the amount of creativity, the lack of creativity coming out of midfield hasn't been good enough so far.
There's been no lack of creativity with RSL. Unbeaten in 10. What other number you got, Doyle?
Our number is 11. That's shot-creating actions from Diego Luna over the past 2 games, either a pass, a dribble, or a drawn foul that leads directly to a shot. That matches his total from the previous 2 months. So in 2 games, he did what he had done in the previous 2 months. Pablo Mastroeni had nothing but praise for Luna after the most recent game, a 5-3 win in the Rocky Mountain Cup, saying it was the best performance the kid has had all year. Credit to Pablo for letting him play through the slump, because now that he's cooking, I think RSL's attack is going to hit another level.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not all on him, which we saw at the end of last season. There was so much pressure on Diego Luna, and he stepped up to the plate. Then, of course, has that really good camp with the national team and came on and made a difference. But I think young players, we have to expect this a little bit. We saw the same thing with Bayraktarovic from that same January camp, and maybe he hasn't quite translated right away back to MLS play. The consistency is always a question mark, but the fact that RSL has this system built now around Chicho Arango allows Diego Luna to come back into the team now, and now that he's getting his confidence back, I think you have to watch out. Just another weapon.
Pablo Mastroeni, always known as a good man manager. Also going on at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on MLS Season Pass is number 9 in the West, St. Louis, taking on number 10 in the West, Seattle Sounders.
Yeah, plus 2.3. That's St. Louis's expected goal differential this year against teams that are below 1.5 points per game. Against teams that are at or above 1.5 points per game, their expected goals differential is minus 4.1. So yeah, they're the 9th place team in the West, and they've been beating the teams that they should beat. And when you look at the records of these two teams, you would assume that St. Louis are going to be the favorites in this one. This is the way the year has played out, and they need this one, especially coming off a little 2-game losing streak.
I don't know if I would buy it on the sense of a must-win, I think. With this point of the season, I just have trouble saying that, but I think you can say that this St. Louis team can expect to try to push against this Sounders team that has been fragile this season. And I think both of these teams, you could almost say it's a must-win right now at this point by the expectations, where I was thinking both of these teams might be near the top of the table in the Western Conference, of course, perennial position for Seattle and then for St. Louis. That's where they ended last season. So I think both teams right here will have a sense of desperation.
What about Brian Schmetzer's side?
Yeah, our number is 18th. That's where Seattle rank in the number of passes they hit that end in their own defensive third. Last year they were 10th, and the years before that they were even higher. And I think what we've seen is the way things have been unsettled in central defense and in central midfield as well. It's really taken a negative toll on Seattle's ability to build patiently from the back, bring the opposing defense upfield, and then hit in behind them. And so it's taken a toll on that end, their inability to use the ball as crisply as we saw in the past. It's taken a toll for them defensively as well, because when they are turning the ball over, it tends to be closer to their own goal, and that's bad news.
Can't argue with the statistic. I can argue with maybe my pronunciation. But I would say the reason for me is different. I think it's actually more the fact of when you're trying to build out and you don't really have a clear option moving forward. That's where you start to lose the ball. You overthink it. You over-rotate. That's where you make mistakes. And that's where we've seen Seattle kind of fall down against the sword of their own demise this season. So I really think it's more the front line doesn't look dynamic. They've gotten a bit older. They don't have that same dynamic weapon that we've seen maybe in the past where you can trust the balls going forward, where it's going to go. And I think that's where that back line starts to get a little bit shaky, start to second guess those decisions and make mistakes.
An Eastern Conference showdown with Orlando City hosting the reigning champs, the Columbus Crew. Let's start with the home side.
Yeah, 143rd. That's where Facundo Torres is among all players in expected assists. He's just behind Emiliano Rigoni, who was just waived, and he's just ahead of Derek Etienne Jr., who was traded for a bag of balls earlier this season. So
Doyle, you're coming in hot
I mean,
Orlando number.
They're waiting. I'm waiting for Facu Torres to come in hot. If you want to point fingers at everything that's gone wrong in Orlando this year, like there are no shortage of targets, but the biggest one is that this guy is supposed to be the best player on the team. And he is 143rd in expected goals this year. He is not getting the job done, whether they've played him on the wing or whether they've played him on a number 10, whether they've played in a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 or a 3-5-2. They have tried all of it, and he has not delivered.
I'm going to sell that. And not that he hasn't delivered, but I don't think that should be the expectation. When I've seen Facu Torres at his best, he's the one finishing the action. He's more of an individual player. He's not a playmaker or the player that you set the whole system around. He's not a clear number 10. He plays out wide. They create action on the other side through Angulo, but it's really the system that hasn't gotten the best of this team. I think Facu Torres is still a quality player, but I would say the expectation for me is not that he's going to be the creative playmaker or the engine that gets this team moving forward. He's the one that I want to see getting on the end of things or maybe coming off as a third option.
What about Columbus?
Our number is 60.8%. That's Columbus's field tilt, which is a fancy way of saying
Field tilt.
the share of final third passes they hit. As in, of the 100% of final third passes that are hit in a game, Columbus are hitting almost 61% of them, which tells us what we see with our eyes. They're a build from the back team, and they're a high possession team. And when they get possession, they get it into the final third, and they ram it down your throat, and they keep it there as long as possible. And in the process, they absolutely wear you out, and it is a remarkable accomplishment to be so good at this, even while they've had to rotate their squad so thoroughly as they try to win CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Caitlin, did you have field tilt on your bingo card today when you came in this morning?
Hey, by the numbers, you got to be ready. That's actually like one of the easier ones for me to understand. It's just tilting the field this way, that's the way it looks like under Wilfred Nancy. I have to agree with that. I'll buy it as well. I think the way that they're able to almost invite pressure to then go the other direction is the part where that thing starts to go downhill for them. And then the fact that they're able to do it during CONCACAF Champions Cup for me is even more impressive. So I'm buying that.
Orlando and Columbus, 7:30 p.m. on the MLS Season Pass. And now we welcome back Taylor, Sasha, and Mo. Last week, we saw the first coaching departure in Major League Soccer, Gary Smith and Nashville SC parting ways, the inaugural manager for the franchise. And they saw relative success, the club making the postseason every single year, but Nashville SC never making it beyond the conference quarterfinals. We did see a Leagues Cup Finals appearance last year for Nashville. General manager Mike Jacobs being pretty open, saying a style change was needed. Now you've got former Liverpool brass CEO Ian Ayre. You can't help but think he's going to be heavily involved. Mo, what type of manager profile would you like to see go to the Music City?
Well, when you talk about a club evolving, you listed all the accolades that they've had so far since their tenure in MLS, and the thing that's lacking there is trophies, right? You get to a Leagues Cup final, and now you want to go that one step further and have your club lift their first trophy in their history. So now I'm not saying this manager is in jeopardy of losing their job, I just think that this profile could suit this Nashville side, and that's a Brian Schmetzer type profile. A manager who, similar to Gary Smith, he puts value on his teams being defensively good, but then in terms of their attacking outlook, there's a little bit more freedom. I think the formations that he generally plays, a 4-2-3-1, it gives more license to the personnel, whether it's the wide players, a number 10 and Hani Mukhtar would have more freedom to go and find the game. But I think that kind of profile could suit Nashville. He knows how to bring young players through the academy and get them into the first team, which is something that Nashville would be looking to do, how to integrate younger players into their team, into their makeup, how to manage bigger personalities, but ultimately how to take a team and have success, whether that's in the Open Cup, whether that's Supporters Shield, or whether that's MLS Cup. I'm curious what you guys think about that kind of profile as an evolution for Nashville.
Wow, you're naming a coach that's unavailable. That coach
but that's what I'm saying.
Not Sounders right now.
I'm not saying take him from. I'm not saying Brian Schmetzer.
Okay.
Brian Schmetzer,
good profile. Okay. I'll throw out a couple of names, a couple of guys that I think Nashville would be lucky to get as a coach. Giovanni Savarese, obviously coached Portland Timbers for 6 years, steady coach. Helps build the team solid defensively. Ronnie Dela, who coached NYCFC to MLS Cup a few years back, was let go by Club Brugge in Belgium a few months back as well. He's available and on the market. I think both of these coaches have been proven in Major League Soccer. But the question also has to be asked of Nashville, are there any actual creators in that midfield? Is everything just always going to fall on Hani Mukhtar to finish off a play in the final third? There's nobody in that midfield that can step up and actually bring the ball forward and put Hani Mukhtar into dangerous positions. That's something that Mike Jacobs has to address this summer in the transfer window as well.
I think that's the bigger conversation, guys. I really do. Listen, Hani Mukhtar was at an historic level in Major League Soccer's history for 3 years. He had more freedom than anyone. Now, Gary Smith, I was as critical of Gary Smith to his face and on broadcast. Can you be a little bit more expansive? Absolutely, sure. Why did LAFC get rid of Walker Zimmerman? Because they knew in order to play that expansive way, he can't play that way necessarily. So Gary Smith takes that roster. They go to the playoffs 4 years. They go to the Leagues Cup final. He made the most of that roster. So you guys can give me all the names in the world regarding the manager. I still have a question. What's their identity? Because when you go out and try to sell me that Drew Yearwood is your big signing, you go out and sign Sam Surge for $6 million. That's more than any money you've spent in the club history. He's never scored more than 10 goals in his calendar year. My question is, in its big picture, what's the identity of that team? It's not as if their existing academy right now is producing 6, 7, 8 players right now either, guys.
So then let's talk about their signing in Hani Mukhtar. This is their number 10, also their leading goal scorer for the past 4 seasons. 29 years old. He's in his prime. He's on a long-term deal. So how important is it in the manager hire to cash in on what they have available in Hani?
Well, whoever comes in has to know how to utilize Hani in the best way going forward. Now, whether that's tactically, whether that's, as Taylor and Sasha alluded to, bringing in pieces that can complement him. The reason why I mentioned someone like Schmetzer is because I see some similarities in terms of some of the successful teams that he had with Seattle Sounders and the personnel that exists with this Nashville squad. I agree that whatever manager comes in, there's going to be changes. There has to be changes. If you're trying to evolve your team, if you're trying to play with a different style of play, formation, tactics, whatever that looks like, there's going to be turnover, and that turnover has to be players that can elevate your team. But when I just look at the personalities that are on that team right now, if they're playing a 4-2-3-1, for example, and Schaffelberg is playing on the left-hand side, and maybe it's Tyler Boyd or Randall Leal on that right-hand side, Hani Mukhtar is operating as your number 10, well, now you have Schaffelberg in a position to where there's more expectation on him. When he's a wingback, yeah, you get forward, you put service in the box, but if he's playing as an out-and-out winger, I want to see that man scoring goals. And so maybe he needs that pressure for him to take his game to the next level. But I agree with you guys. Ultimately, whenever you change coaches, it's not as simple as just plugging in and play, especially when you make statements saying that you want to change how your team plays from an aesthetic standpoint, but ultimately from a success standpoint as well.
And Mike Jacobs didn't only make the statement that he wants to, play, reading between the lines, a more exciting style of soccer. He also said, we made this change now, Taylor, because we want to still compete this year. You're calling for that they have to support Hani. People have been beating that drum now for years, including Hani Mukhtar. So if you want to attract a big-name coach that an Ian Ayre type can attract, do you make the change this summer and then go out and hire the manager? Because they're implying that they're going to make a coaching change now. Would you get a better manager after the summer if you make a change?
I don't know. Sorry, Joey. What's the question?
Do you make the change with the roster first and then wait on the bigger coaching hire?
Well, some coaches aren't going to take the job based on the current roster.
That's my question.
So unless they know exactly who you're signing and who you're targeting, listen, Hani Mukhtar's been run into the ground. He's had one teammate that has scored more than 5 goals in a calendar year since he's been in Nashville. One. I mean, so all I'm saying is Hani single-handedly carried this team in the attack. Absolutely 100% about it. Gary Smith recognized it. Could he have been more expansive? Sure. Is some of the criticism of Gary Smith factual? Absolutely. But I just want everyone to understand, you don't just show up at Nashville and all of a sudden they're going to be scoring and playing like Columbus or playing like LAFC or playing like Miami or Cincinnati. That's not how that works. It's not. And they've got to find a way to maybe get the manager on the docket while also saying this is who's coming this summer. But Sam Surge has never scored 10 goals in a calendar year. He's not all of a sudden going to score 28 goals. That's not how that works. Doesn't matter who the manager is. So I think they both got to happen. The roster's got to be exponentially better and deeper. Randall Leal hasn't played in how long? And the manager's got to be more expansive and be able to manage all types of players. Wilfred Nancy, what does he do arguably better than anyone in the league? Players 28-1 get managed the same way with how they're trying to progress. He benched Cucho Hernandez for 2 games because he said he wasn't playing at the level that he could play at, no different than Mohamed Farsi. They've got to get someone that can manage up all the players. Sure, that criticism of Gary Smith is legit. But the amount of criticism about this team should be this team should be playing this, with who? With who?
All questions that may become answered this summer or not. We'll see what Mike Jacobs and Ian Ayre do over at Nashville SC. As for the opponent this weekend in Montreal, Sasha, 1 win in their last 10. What's broken?
Well, first and foremost, it was the mentality this past weekend when they played in the Canadian Classique. It was apparent that when the game started, Toronto FC was ready to play in a derby match, and Montreal looked like they were playing in the park with their friends. And 19 minutes after the whistle blew, it looked like a bus had hit them, and they were knocked out of the match, and they were finished. So first and foremost, Laurent Courtois has to get this team back to where he had them in the first few weeks of the season, where they were motivated and had a tough mentality that they were hard to play against and they could hit you on the counter. They've got a big opportunity to do that this weekend and to rebound against this Nashville team.
All right, we'll see how it all pans out this weekend. That does it for our show, getting you all set for match day 16. We'll see you next week.